Many a little girl dreams of becoming a princess one day without actually understanding the difficulties that go along with it. The queenly qualms, as it were. We'll get there in a second. We had a family over for lunch this past week, and one of the little girls comes out dressed in a princess costume, and I'm like, "Oh, are you a princess?" And she looks at me and says, "No, I am the queen." Of course. But we know that the life of the real-life princesses are not so easy. You may be familiar that there are, of course, many princesses around the world still. In places like Japan, there is still an emperor and a princess. And recently, Princess Mako made headlines because she dared to marry a commoner. She is the daughter of the emperor's younger brother, Crown Prince Fumihito, who is in line for the throne, and the Japanese royal family is getting less and less. So to marry a commoner is to abdicate and cut off the royal line so it can't go through you. And people did not really like her husband because there was a lot of, drama and rumors and things. And so without paying any taxpayer money, because princesses are funded by the public thing. So without any taxpayer money, they got married after years of delay amid the controversy. They just went to a government office and said, "Sign the papers, we are married." And people were still mad at them because this princess was raised on royal funds, and how dare she have a marriage outside of their parameters and outside of their fulfillment of the continued progress of the royal family. You think of Kate Middleton, perhaps true princess story, and yet only a few hours after giving birth was expected to publicly display herself and her child. Some of you who have given birth know, wow, that is intense. Princesses have a lot of pressure, and queens have some qualms. And when you look at the book of Esther and you keep going through it, Esther really gets everything. She gets wealth beyond imagining. She has appreciation and respect from everyone around her. She has higher status than all the other women around her, including the other wives. Her family supports her, and her husband loves her. It says he loves her. Yet, as we walk through this story and we see it, it's actually a really bad situation. She's not in a good place. And we're going to see how God uses her bad situation for his glory, her good, and the salvation of God's people. So I want to appeal to all of us, but especially the women. Last week we talked about the men and some bad examples from the king, but to the women, that the dreams you have need to be conformed to the image of Christ, to Christlikeness. Comparison is such a killer of joy, isn't it? It's easy to see that lady's posts on Facebook or the Christmas card that comes in mail, and you think, why does she just have a perfect life? It's easy to look at the queen or the princess and say, she just has the perfect Cinderella story. Why is God answering her prayers and not mine? And then you hear a little bit more. You actually read something about their life, or maybe you talk to that person. You're like, wow, they actually have plenty of trials too. She is not getting all her prayers answered. So perhaps we don't have the whole story, or perhaps you are sometimes forgetting the whole story of what God is doing in your life and your unanswered prayers and the trials that you are having as well. So may we be reminded to prepare for eternity, as we'll get there. Now, like every good story, there is a last time on. You know, remember in TV shows? Last time on such and such show. And verses 1 through 4 is recalling what happened last time. You will recall how King Ahasuerus got really mad at the Queen Vashti because he called her to come. After these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed by her. It makes sense he got really angry because he was really drunk after a 7-day party of drinking, but that's after also 6 months of partying to his greatness. We said how all of his riches were on display, all of his power. He was full of himself and full of alcohol. And his wife dared say no to something he said. And he blew up and instantly said, what do we need to do about this? And his advisors gave him a great idea, get rid of her. And so he did. But now he needs another set of advisors. Because if you make a decision in anger, you're probably going to regret it. It's not a good time to make decisions. You just got to take a deep breath, calm down, pray. His foolish example of one whose strength was all a lie. Maybe that's why he got so angry, because his strength was not actually as strong as he thought it was, and we'll see some more of that in the following weeks. But his anger subsides, and now he regrets his decision. He thinks about what happened, and he's like, man, I shouldn't have done this. This is a man, as I said, who has no conviction. He is a slave to his emotions and whims, which is so contrary to what we saw as God calls older men to teach younger men one key trait, self-control in Titus 2. Doing the right thing even when you don't feel like it. And so now he needs his young advisors to come up with a new idea. And they say, well, why don't we get the most beautiful women in the kingdom to come to you? The king's attendants who served with him said, let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king. Let the king appoint overseers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather every beautiful young virgin to the citadel of Susa, to the harem, into custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let cosmetics be given to them. Then let the young lady who pleases the king be queen in place of Vashti. And the matter pleased the king, and he did accordingly. So 3 requirements for a queen. Only 3. She has to be young, probably around 13 years old. She has to be an unmarried virgin, and she has to be utterly beautiful. Maybe not the best standard for a queen. Again, the issue with Vashti is saying she was not obedient, so they don't even put obedient on the list. It's just, these are things, and of course, the king's like, yeah, this sounds great. And sadly, this is not a wonderful beauty contest. This is a one-way ticket into the king's harem. Many young women probably, when this news went out, bemoaned the fact that they were beautiful. This was an end to the life you thought you had, and a redirection to serving the king and the king alone. And in the midst of all of this, and all these big events where these powerful men are making decisions, we meet Esther, our titular character, and Mordecai. And today I'm going to try and show you, as we walk through this, how the queen's trials show you the best goal of being conformed to Christ. What the queen goes through is to show you that the goal is to be made like Christ. This week, we're going to talk about the trials of that part, and next week, we're going to see how she is made like Christ. So, Esther's triple take should transform your examination of weakness. How do you think about weakness, and how does Esther being taken 3 times change your thoughts about it? Verses 5 through 8, Esther is taken 3 times over and over again. First off, Esther is taken from her people. Verses 5 and 6. Now there was at the citadel in Susa a Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been taken into exile from Jerusalem with the captives, who had been exiled with Josiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had exiled. Now, this is really important because all the empire is being gathered in little old Susa here. Remember last week we showed from end to end, from India, Pakistan to Egypt, is the great Persian Empire, and right in the center is Susa, where they're all being pulled to. It's about 150 miles north of the Persian Gulf, 750 miles to the east of Jerusalem, and there, in the city where everyone's being pulled, is already a Jew named Mordecai? Why is a Jew in Persia, 750 miles from Jerusalem? Timeline, again. You will recall that his family tree, listed here, goes back to the exile in 586 BC. 586 BC, we received the warning from a prophet named Jeremiah, where he said, Jeremiah 7:4, "Don't trust in the deceptive words, saying, 'This is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord.'" Disobedient Jewish people, the Israelites, the kings, were not living and honoring to the God. They broke the covenants and commandments given repeatedly throughout their history. They were given chance after chance. The northern kingdom was sent into exile. The southern kingdom was warned, and they said, no. We have the temple in our backyard. We're safe. God would never touch the temple. And Jeremiah warned them, this is not going to work. Don't trust in the temple, trust in me. And we read about here King Jehoiakim, who was the one we read about in Habakkuk. His also name is Jehoiachin, a horribly abusive, unkind king who disobeyed God. And him and many others received God's judgment and were taken into exile out of Jerusalem, up across the wilderness and to Babylon. The exile began. And so now we have this family tree sitting in Susa in 480 BC. But this is a key part as we understand these characters. If you remember your Bible history, you should know that they should not still be there in the east. They should be back in Jerusalem because God did not just send them into exile. He also gave this great promise of restoration. There was one amazing passage in Isaiah 43, verse 5 and 6. He said, "Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bring your offspring from the east and gather you from the west. I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not hold them back. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth." Isaiah 43, 5 and 6. And King Cyrus comes along in 539 BC and declares, "Send the people home." If you want to flip back just a couple pages to the book of Ezra, Ezra chapter 1 is happening around the same time. In Ezra chapter 1, verse 1, we read, "Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia." What nation is Esther happening in? Persia. So this is same. This is right beforehand. Same nation. In order to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, and the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia. Verse 3, "Whoever there is among you of all his people, may his God be with him. Let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and rebuild the house of the Lord Yahweh, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem." And we read about 50,000 Jews head back to Jerusalem. And in 510 BC, the temple is rebuilt. But here we are, around 60 years later, 70 years later, in 480-ish BC, and they are sitting in Susa, in the east. So we have to ask the question, why are Mordecai and Esther here in Susa and not in Jerusalem? It's an important question because a number of passages seems to say God doesn't just suggest go on back, he commands them. Jeremiah 31:21, he says, "Set up for yourself road marks, place for yourself guideposts, direct your minds to the highway, the way which you went. Return, O Virgin of Israel, return to your cities. Jeremiah 31:21. He's telling them, as you go out, remember the path. You know, sometimes it's wise if you're going out on a trail somewhere and you don't exactly know the way back to leave some markings. People like to stack rocks of 3 up to say, here's the pathway. So you follow the path, because sometimes it gets confusing. And he says, follow the path and head back when you can. But they're not going back. Now, we also know there are guys like Daniel. Daniel was taken into captivity, and he doesn't head back, but stays to rule along with Darius and gets thrown in the lion den for it. But he's around 90 years old. So you go, well, yeah, that'd be pretty hard to make that long trip when you're 90 years old. Nehemiah was a cupbearer to the king. Nehemiah is staying in Persia. So we read that in Ezra 1 verse 4, how people needed funding to go back. Ezra 1:4, every survivor, at whatever place he may live, let the men of that place support him with silver and gold, with goods and cattle, together with a freewill offering for the house of God which is in Jerusalem. Verse 6, all those about them encourage them with articles of silver, with gold, with goods, with cattle, with valuables, aside from all that was given as a freewill offering. And so there's a thought that men of high position would then have to use their wealth to try and send other Jews back. And since they're using their wealth and they're accumulating wealth to try and continually send Jews back, they themselves cannot go, which is definitely a possibility. Mordecai is sitting at the gate of the king's palace, which means he's in an important position of leadership and protection, as we'll see. But there is a key difference between guys like Daniel and Nehemiah and Mordecai. Even in their names, Daniel is a Jewish name. Nehemiah is a Jewish name. Mordecai is derived from the Babylonian god Marduk. It's a Persian name and a idolatrous Persian name. The fact that he holds this name is difficult. Yes, the first generation was given new names, but later generations don't seem to. And so you're like, why does he have this name? And perhaps even more importantly, he forbids Esther from letting anyone know that they are Jews. In chapter 2, verse 10, we read, Esther did not make known her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had instructed her that she should not make them known. There's a bit of interpretation issue there of whether it's both of them or just her. But either way, he's saying, we want to keep this a secret. Do you remember what happened to Daniel when he was asked to eat the king's food? When he was asked to eat a table that he thought would defile himself, he had to go right away and say, no, I won't do it. When he was told to follow the king's command to bow down at the idol, when Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were told to bow to the statue, what happened to them? They were all caught because they refused. So how do you prevent anyone from knowing you are a Jew? By not following the law of God that makes you look really different. I want to try and show you that as we walk through this book over and over again, the author of Esther goes out of his way to show God's name is not mentioned. Even when we get really close to and they fast, they don't pray. There's no mention of praying, there's no mention of God. And myself and many theologians would agree that this is because these are not God-fearing Jews right now. These are people who are trying to slide underneath the radar. They are trying to hide because they know what it has cost them. And God is graciously showing them they cannot hide. God is showing that even when they are not faithful to keep the law, He is faithful to protect them, and He will be faithful even to conform them to His Son. I want to try and say that they're not where they should be. They're not doing what they should be. And it's easy at times to think our spiritual heroes have to be just amazing at everything, right? There are times you look at someone who you really respect, and then they do something that you kind of question, And you're like, well, why are they making it, like, that seems a bit wrong or sinful. And rather than chalking up saying, hey, they're a sinner too, maybe this is wrong, we make excuses for them. We say, oh no, it must be okay for them to do this because they're just such a godly person. But might I contest that one of the greatest women of the Bible, one of the greatest women of faith, is Martha, the sister of Mary and Lazarus. You know how Lazarus dies. He's famous for it, his resurrection from Jesus. And in John 11, we read about how Jesus delayed going and let Lazarus die because he loved him. Martha comes running up to him in the street when Jesus arrives, and she says in John 11, 21 and 22, Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. That is not a statement of complaint. That is a statement of utter faith. She's saying, he would not have died, and you know what? You could still help Jesus. Like, dead is dead. And not only that, she had amazing theology because Jesus says he's going to be resurrected. And her response is, John 11, 24, I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Her eschatology is down pat. She is a woman of faith. She is a woman of understanding. She knows the truth. And so it's a bit shocking when we compare that Martha with the Martha we read in Luke 10. You know, Jesus goes to their house to have a wonderful feast, and Mary is sitting and listening to Jesus. Martha is busy preparing the meal, bringing food out, taking care of anyone. And Luke 10, verse 40, God says Martha was distracted with all her preparations. And so she comes up to Jesus and says, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving? Tell her to help me. Not only does she complain to Jesus and question Jesus' caring, she commands Jesus. Again, great theology, great woman of faith, really bad moment. Jesus turns to her and says, Martha, Martha. And if you look through your Bible and you see when Jesus repeats a name, like Peter, Peter, Satan has requested to sift you. Or Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? That is not a, oh, hey, it's okay. No, a rebuke is coming. Jesus rebukes her gently, but strongly. As we have to see, the heroes in the Bible are like us. They have clay feet, to use the phrase. They're not superheroes. They're not superhuman. They are sinners like us, and they have their great moments, and they have their bad ones. They have people who God allows to go on in their sin in the long time and then saves them. So what should we think about people who hide their faith? Is that a good thing? Is this an example to be followed? And I say, given the persecution that's about to come in the book of Esther, you will recall as we read through it, spoiler warnings if you haven't remembered recently, someone's going to try and wipe them all out. It's very common. In my own family, it was often the thought of saying, well, you're Jewish, but keep quiet about it because it's only going to get you persecuted. That was the thinking that was taught down. But might I suggest God says that's not okay. To the Jews, he told them that they were to be a kingdom of priests. Exodus 19, 5 through 6. If you will obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. What are priests supposed to do? Represent God to the people and represent the people to God. So their mission, their existence is to be ambassadors, to be priests coming between. And we see from others that hiding their faith wasn't necessary. Daniel was able to live in highest levels of Persian leadership so faithfully. He did such a good job. The only thing they could get him on was his prayer life at home. Daniel chapter 6, verse 5. The men who were trying to take authority from Daniel said, "We will not find any ground of accusation against this Daniel unless we find it against him with regard to the law of his God." Daniel was a stickler to God's law. And did everything turn out okay for Daniel? Yes. By faith, God had him. In a similar way, do you and I have reasons to hide our Christian faith sometimes? Absolutely. We want to trust and believe in our rights as Americans to have our religious practice. But then there are guys like Jack Phillips in Colorado, the cake baker. For those of you who haven't heard of him, please do a little research, listen to him. This is a man who has won at the Supreme Court over and over again, and yet continues to have another lawsuit put against him because in his conscience he said, "I cannot make a cake for a gay wedding. That is not what I can do to celebrate. I'll give you another cake, but not that. I cannot make a cake for a transgender coming out party. I can't do that. This is not honoring to God. I can't make a happy Satan Days cake." All these things have come against him repeatedly. People have lost their jobs because of their faith. You risk people hitting back when you stand out in a hostile world, when you say, "I know the whole culture is saying this, but God says this." Moms, your children are going to be like that at times. Your children are going to stand out and be different. And people are going to point to those differences and try and exploit them. Ladies, your marriage opportunities, your friendships may be withheld from you because you are different. But Jesus said, we have a purpose. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket or on a lampstand and give it light to all who are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Matthew 5:13 through 16. Brothers and sisters, how can they glorify God who is your Father if you don't let them know He is your Father? You might be doing great works, and they might think of you like a magician who's like, wow, how do they do this? And we are to give credit to God. Jesus warned and said, whoever denies me before men, I will deny him before my Father is in heaven. And so there is something worse than being fired. There is denying Jesus Christ. Some of you have done that. Some of you even deny Christ because you're saying, I don't need him. And the beauty of the gospel is, as you fail and you sin, all you need to do is recognize, I have sinned, oh God, please forgive me. I am not good in myself. I need Jesus to die in my place. And you can be saved, you can be sanctified. We speak in these ways because we know, as 1 Timothy 3:12 says, all who desire to live godly lives will be persecuted. It's one reason I do enjoy ministering in California. We get to be distinct from the world. It's easy to just talk the talk and say, oh yes, I go to church. I haven't been there in 30 years, as one neighbor once told me, but I go to church. Okay, go, doesn't sound like it. But here, we have more pressure. And as the ancient Japanese proverb says, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. At times, we're going to get hammered down. We, though, need to say, our mission is to be different. Our mission is to proclaim Christ. And God will use this in Esther and Mordecai's life to show them they can't get away with hiding. Now, Esther probably had no choice in the matter as she walks through this, because we read, secondly, not only she's taken from her people, she was also taken as an orphan. She was taken from her parents. Verse 7. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had no father or mother. Now the young lady was beautiful of form and face, And when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. Notice her birth name, Hadassah, a great good Jewish name that means myrtle. But her name is changed to Esther, which means star, and is derived from the Greek goddess Ishtar. A lot of people think most likely her parents gave her the name Hadassah. Mordecai, who also has a name based off a Persian god, changed it to Esther to fit in better. Bible doesn't say, but that's a possibility. Her birth story, of course, has those additional sadnesses because being an orphan was extremely dangerous in that society. People would not, and being an exiled orphan, whether family is around, she, though, is adopted by her father's nephew or her cousin. I mentioned this to my kids this past week, and they're like, wait, what? She's a cousin? I thought he was her uncle. We often miss this up, but if you look in the text and you see her, make it very easy for you. Family tree. They share the same grandfather. He is taking his uncle's daughter, which makes them cousins. There's a little bit of wiggle room in the interpretation in the Hebrew there, but the instances of this word meaning anything other than uncle are very, very rare. So cousins, which can totally happen. Our oldest nephew is 27 years old, so you could totally imagine if something happened to us and all of our family, our children could be adopted by a 27-year-old, right? That could happen. So cousins can be different generations slightly. And the thing we know most clearly about her is she is very beautiful. This is a beautiful everyone. Beautiful, she is seen beautifully by everyone. So she has lost everything. This is not a way you want to be raised, yet she is taken by a man who cares for her. Look down in verse 7. I want to point out something to you. It says, he was bringing up Hadassah. Now, that literal translation of that word bringing up is taken. It is the same Hebrew word used in verse 8. You go down a little bit further, kind of in the middle of verse 8, it says, Esther was taken to the king's palace into the custody of Hegai. Two different people take her to very different situations. Initially, she is taken in by a man who loves her. Verse 8, she is taken by men who care very little for her except what she can do for them and for their king. This is no anti-men feminist story. This is just a reality that the Bible is laying out of good men and bad men in the world of this poor young woman. Esther is powerlessly taken as an orphan and taken by the king. A phrase has often been thrown out there. The best way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. There's some truth to that. Maybe we could argue about whether that's the case or not. But what I want to say is even more clear than that is the best way to fight abuse of authority is good authority. The best way to fight those who would harm and hurt is those who would protect. And women need good men in their lives because there are bad men in this world. May I just suggest, women, that God created you with a particular purpose distinct from men. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, Yahweh says, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." And he brings about woman. The phrase is often used. God did not make Eve from Adam's feet so she would be beneath him, nor his head so that she would be above him, but by his side so that she would be next to him. She would be a helper suitable for him. Helper doesn't mean the help. Like, oh yeah, this is my, person that is the help, and they're lowly, and they come and do what I tell them to do. But God is called the helper of Israel. It is a statement of great strength and using your ability to help others. If you are a wife, your strength is to be used to help your husband, who is your head. If you're not married, the Bible doesn't call you to submit to all men, but it does call you a number of places to submit to those in authority over you. Romans 13 has the governing authorities. Hebrews 13 has the elders. The best way to be against bad authority is to have good authority. And no matter where you are, to use your strength and abilities to help others. God, repeatedly as we walk through here, uses Mordecai to help Esther in such a way that she would be in a dangerous situation otherwise. Now, the dreaded moment does arrive in Esther's life. The news has gone out, and you can imagine just kind of the murmurings and going, is it going to happen? Am I beautiful enough? Will they call me? Am I old enough? Will they call me? But in verse 8, we see how Esther was taken by the king. So it came about when the command and decree of the king were heard, and many young ladies were gathered to the citadel of Susa into the custody of Hegai, that Esther was taken to the king's palace, into the custody of Hegai, who was in charge of the women. This is not a good situation. This is not I give my best try, and if the king doesn't like me, I move on. But look down at verse 14. She would go in, and in the morning she would return to the second harem, to the custody of Shahagagaz, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not go again into the king unless the king delighted in her, and she was summoned by name. She goes and stays with Shahagaz, the king's director of harems. And a king's harem was one more way he showed off his wealth and power, but they would live in luxury, but it would basically be a luxurious prison. Their lives were over. They had nowhere to go. Once you have been with the king, you go nowhere else. This was not a good day to be taken in. And Esther was taken in by a very selfish man, a very whimsical man, a man who keeps changing his opinion, right? So this, as we've led up in chapter 1, is kind of a very scary situation. And there's a lot of selfishness in the natural world. Sin came in and took what is supposed to be an act of love, that is marriage, and it corrupted it. And the Bible here is not then prescribing, hey, here's the biblical way to get married. If you want to get married and you're really rich and powerful, just bring all the ladies to you and you get to pick the best one, right? No. This is describing what sinful people do. Chapter 1 kind of laid out for us. This is not a man to be followed, right? So his way is not a good way. And there are rare times that atheists get it right. Too often, atheists will look and say, religion and religion wars. Religion oppresses women. How dare it? Like, this is a story in the Bible. How could this be in here? You go, well, actually, this is saying what we shouldn't do. This is a bad situation. But every once in a while, atheists are really honest about their opinions. There was one guy named Marquis de Sade, or Sade. I think it's Sade or Sadie. I heard it. But we get the word sadism from him, because he was a very evil man who came up very frontward to say it. He said, in France, there is no God. Therefore, there is no external moral standard. We believe in the power of evolution, in the right of the fittest. And so he said, you should do whatever makes you happy. Sounds good, right? But in nature, the powerful overcome the weak. The stronger are happier when they take advantage of the weak. So why would you not take pleasure in your tormenting those weaker than you? Animals do it all the time. And so he took evolution to its logical end, where he said, if the survival of the fittest made men stronger than women, a man has a right to do whatever he wants to a woman. One evolutionary thinker right after Darwin actually made the proposition that women have evolved in such a way that they can appease the brute strength of men. And they are more evolved the quieter they are about the abuse of men. That is evolutionary thinking. That is in writing. This is what is being described. And you can't argue against that in a naturalistic worldview. We can try and discuss that, like why love actually brings about the survival of the fittest. It doesn't. Love does not bring about survival. Love continues to protect the weak. And so Esther here is being described what happens in a natural evil world. A selfish man is taking her. Kids, you are so blessed in so many ways that you have Christian parents who are protecting you from much of this evil world. There are a lot of dark things in this world. They are out there. And so I want to give you guys hope, but to all of us, in particular hope. The Bible describes dark things happen, and we need to remember in the midst of that there is hope in scary times. First off, let us realize it's not some abnormal thing when you experience pains, problems, persecutions. Peter says in 1 Peter 4:12, "Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal among you, which comes upon you for your testing, as though some strange thing were happening to you." It's not a strange thing. It's normal. Trials and fiery things come, but God is using these things in your life for your good. Joseph, who was abused by his own brothers, who was taken in authority against him, he said, Genesis 50:20, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive." And God uses your trust in him to overcome the world. Jesus made it very clear in John 16:33, "These things I have spoken to you, so that you may have peace. In this world you will have tribulation." Wait, you just said peace, Jesus. How are we going to have peace in tribulation? "But take courage. I have overcome the world." 1 John 5:4 says, what overcomes the world? Our faith, our trust in him. You don't need to say, "Oh God, why did you allow this horrible thing to happen to me?" Instead, you get to say, "How, oh God, will you use this horrible thing for my good and your glory?" I'm looking forward to seeing that answer. Next week, we're going to see how God is using this situation to make Esther more like himself. This week, we kind of focused on the weakness. She was taken from her people in exile. She was taken from her parents, or her parents taken from her, and she was taken by the king. But what we see as weakness is actually opportunity for God to work. This is Franny Ridley Havergal, who is famous for writing the hymn, "Take My Life and Let It Be." And she had a lot of difficulties in her life, and she wrote about them saying, "Let us remember that again and again God has shown that the influence of very average life, which once really consecrated to him, may overweigh that of almost any number of merely professing Christians. Such lives are like Gideon's 300, carrying not every ordinary weapons of war, but only trumpets and lamps and empty pitchers, by whom the Lord wrought great deliverance, while he did not use the others at all. For he hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things that are mighty." Never let your weakness, your past, your difficulties, your situation say that you cannot be used mightily by God, but trust him and let his sovereignty play out. Let's pray. Lord, your name is excellent. Your glory is high. Your compassion's unfailing.